All right, I think let's get going, and good day wherever you are from in the world. We're coming to you from South Africa, at the bottom of Africa, where it's a beautiful sunny day today. My name is Anton Grutter. I'm the R&D Director of the Lean Institute Africa. I've been with Leah since we started in 2008 at the Graduate School of Business of University of Cape Town. And before that, I taught at another university here in Cape Town. We're a small institute, but we've worked in diverse sectors such as manufacturing, healthcare, mining, finance, NGOs, and even in the justice system. So please do ask questions in the chat during the presentation, and we'd be happy to respond at the end. And now let me get on to introducing our speakers. Ben Hoseas partners with organizations on the journey of continuous improvement and operational excellence as a coach and an advisor. He has wide experience in operations, supply chain, human resources, and project management in a variety of sectors in many different parts of the world. Tsepo Tobiane is a director at the Lean Institute Africa. He has worked in improvement roles in the private and public sector for the past 18 years. And his particular interest is to assist organizations to determine how to integrate continuous improvement into their business architecture with a clear link to the organization's strategy. And then last but not least, Mr. Gray Dube retired as CEO of Leratong Hospital after a career of 47 years in the Department of Health in Gauteng province of South Africa. He led the adoption of lean management at the hospital, and it was so successful that he was invited to present at the Catalysis Lean Healthcare Summit in 2018 and 2019. So without further ado, can I hand over to Ben so that he can get us going?
Absolutely. And thank you, Anton. It's a pleasure to be with you guys from around the world. I did just want to take a moment to reflect on how neat of an event this has been, to be able to interact and engage with people from around the world 24 hours. So big thank you to the Lean Global Network and the team at LAI for putting this on. And you see us there in South Africa in the middle. I was a little disappointed when we did the poll of which country would you like to visit. South Africa was not doing very strong, but don't let that variant news scare you away. Please come and visit. It's a beautiful part of the world. So a brief background on my story. I started out in the US, as you can probably tell. I had the privilege and the opportunity to work for Toyota Kentucky there for a number of years as a human resource specialist. And that indoctrinated me, along with my upbringing with my father, Michael Hoseas, who you heard speak yesterday, into the world of lean leadership. And so since then, I've really had a heart to go out and learn and understand and do. And that's led me to Australia. I lived in Melbourne for a couple of years, and that offered the opportunity to work in different parts of Southeast Asia, and then across the US into Europe a bit. And then in South Africa, my heart has been here since I first stepped foot in Cape Town back in 2017. I had the privilege on my second day in the city to meet Anton and go out and visit a fantastic organization that's using lean principles to drive community development. So I knew from day one that if you wanted to go be in a lean environment and a lean team, do that in a place that has tremendous upside, tremendous opportunity for growth, and a population that is willing to learn. So that's what's led me here. And it's a privilege again to be with Anton and Tsepo and Mr. Gray Dube. And they'll be sharing more with you here momentarily. So we want to introduce some of our leadership traits for the next generation. And I've done this presentation or versions of it several times now. And it's traditionally been in the vein of millennials. So how do you get millennials engaged? How do you get millennials to stick around in the company? And I think it has become outdated a little bit because Gen Z is now entering the workforce and different aspects are shifting with that. And so I stepped back and said, these principles are applicable more so to leadership. And how do we bring our people into an environment that is conducive for problem solving, conducive for engagement, and that really inspires them enough to be able to stay. And we've said now recently in the age of COVID, it's very easy to shift where you work. So if I'm not enjoying or if I'm not finding fulfillment, in my current role, all that it would take me to switch a job is to change where I would log into Zoom or whatever platform you use. So we've never seen it as quick as a resignation as it's been. That's what they're calling it in the US. So I would say now more than ever, it's important that we focus on how do we build these types of environments and systems for our people that are, again, conducive to their growth and development. So as a leader, these are the 3 key traits that we want to focus on for our time today. I'll touch on courage and collaboration, and then I'll let Seppo and Mr. Gray work through an interview and a great kind of case study from his experience around curiosity and some of these other leadership traits. So with courage, let's touch on a key couple subtasks or sub-elements here. So clarity and empathy, and sound like nice words, but I would say clarity for me is clarity first of thinking. And so when you walk into the factory floor at a Toyota facility, wherever you are in the world, you'll see it widely emblazed on the banners there that says good thinking, good products. And I love that. So every day walking in, there's a good reminder to ground yourself and focus on, again, where are we now? Where are we heading? What is the standard and what should be happening? So I wanted to put this slide up around clarity to set the stage of a nice progression. And we've heard some great case studies and lectures from our other speakers this last few hours. How do we use lean? How do we use agile? How do we use Six Sigma, et cetera, to really drive this transformation and drive this progress across an enterprise? So I like this quick 4 phases just as a nice simple framework to give us a grounding of what it would mean to establish clarity in the organization. And so again, phase 1, we're setting a clear purpose, direction, and we're asking that question, what should be happening? And you heard my father speak yesterday, perhaps, that when we work our way from phase 1 to phase 2, it becomes so important and critical to set a target and define that standard. Because if the team doesn't have consensus or the team is not clear about what the standard should be, then it just becomes a matter of guesswork and a matter of opinion. And I've been fighting some battles with that recently, and it's just how much or how many, and people call them junk words sometimes. We say, oh, there's a lot of problems we're dealing with, or this should be that high. And when it's subjective by nature, you obviously can't have a clear basis from which to improve. So no standard, no problem is a great tenet to come back to as a leader, and how you set that standard within your organization. Phase 3, so making the problems visible. So we all know the lean tools. I'm sure we've all had different levels of education, certification, et cetera, around what these tools can do. And we know they're very effective when you apply them in the context of a bit.
Hi, Ben, we lost you there for a moment.
But it truly is around this idea that any of the lean tools that we're putting into practice are there to make problems visible and surface those for discussion. So moving into phase 4, this is where it gets difficult perhaps. So we've had the fun part of kind of setting the stage and bringing the team along and putting some things on the wall, getting the problems going, getting the discussion going. But this is really where the rubber meets the road around how do we develop the team around us to become problem solvers to help us reach those goals. And so I would say this behavior of leadership is the most difficult aspect to really build and to train as a habit. And it takes practice, and it takes just starting to get working on that train. And I believe that having a coach or a mentor is a very helpful thing to do, but just to be able to continue to ask the right questions as a leader. Edgar Schein calls it humble inquiry, or going in with a learner's mind, and really having that humility to go in and ask your team members, what are they seeing? What are their pain points? What problems are they working to solve? And then as a leader, how can I help and support you for us to be able to reach those? So one quick other point on that, people have had it on the slide, so I didn't know if it was worth mentioning, but the 4 types of problems, so Art Smalley mentions those. That's a critical aspect as well. And it's very difficult when you first get going to prioritize between different problems, because people love to bring problems to the surface. They love to have that banter and discussion around what they're observing, what they're finding. But for you as a leader to be able to help them categorize and put those into the right context of a level 1 or a level 2, getting up to standard, or then a level 3, level 4, increasing or innovating towards another standard or target condition, that's a critical way for you as a leader to help them differentiate what context and what tools to apply. All right, so on the vein of empathy, and we'll hit these quickly, but these 4 questions, I love giving these as homework. Any environment I go into for the first time, I have a great introduction training, but part of that training is for us to reflect on these questions. Even if I went out to the shop floor or into my office and I ask these to one individual who I traditionally would say hello to or say good morning to, or, hey, what's going on? But if you can get into the habit and discipline of saying, hey, what's going well within your role? What needs to be improved? Where do you need help? And then to the point, where can I support you? How can I support you? This is a difficult question to ask, because once you've asked it, you will more than likely over time get an answer that does require action on your part as a leader. So I would say that be careful asking it to start out. If you're not willing to take the action necessary to give your team member or give your compatriot there the support that they need in order to work through what they're doing. But over time, as you become more disciplined in your standard work as a leader, and as you're going through the Gemba, to be able to truly ask these questions, say, how can I support you? And have a cadence and a routine for how you're able to do that. That's a powerful way for you to establish that trust and rapport with the team as a leader. I'm sure Mr. Gray will have stories around that in his case study. Two final ones before we turn it over here. So accountability and transparency, a couple of buzzwords again, but accountability is an often misinterpreted, misunderstood word that becomes more and more critical as you enter into a lean environment. So when problems are put onto the wall and we're holding each other accountable, the team is accountable to reaching a result, how do you create that culture around it where there is trust and there is mutual respect for people to appreciate that it's not a system for them to get beat over the head with, it's a system for them to solve problems with. And that gives rise to the transparency. So when you have that principle and that guiding tenet of having those issues clearly identified, having those results and metrics that give a clear indication of where you are and where you're heading, that obviously we know bodes well. So a reference point here, feel free to come back to it, but just a couple quick tick marks. I'm sure there's many more we could add to this, but around engagement. So how do we tell when our team members are in a position where they're contributing, where they're able to engage, and where we as a leader know that we put them in a position to succeed? So we've created a system where people are held accountable, not just individual accountability, but truly to the team and to the organization that they're working with, and that they understand their role, they understand the linkage to the results, and that they are working day in and day out kind of towards those in a collective sense. Transparency, I like to call this the a la carte menu of problem-solving activity, and obviously use it as a reference, what have you. So just as a view, you get this idea, this daily and virtually constant problem-solving activity. I've heard it called the silver bullet of the Toyota success and the organizations that are practicing this lean approach. If you can get your team members from the executive level to the shop floor level, all the value-added workers in between, for them to be constantly engaged in this problem-solving, whether at a huddle meeting, at a visual board, in a review session, in a quality circle, what have you, there are many of these ways. And then I would also guide your attention to some of these more individual elements or longer-term elements around the upskilling and the cross-skilling, the training development. We've heard it a lot this last couple of days, great case studies from around the world about organizations are realizing the need for more definition and clarity around what are the role responsibilities, the skills, the roles responsibilities kind of across the team, so to speak, but having a clear mechanism and a clear framework as a company for how we allow our team members to develop towards goals that obviously benefit the company, but in the same vein of that long-term mutual prosperity, that are working towards their individual goals as well. And we see some of those mentioned in the bottom right with the personal goals. So the focus again around the four words you've heard. So the clarity, empathy, the accountability, and transparency. How do we as a leader create this system, create this culture, have that intentional sense that what we're doing is really going to affect our team members, our managers, people that we put into positions to allow others to succeed. So it's a challenge, obviously, but I'll turn it over here to Seppo and Mr. Gray to give us a view of how it's been done in a very complex and challenging environment. Happy. So Seppo, take it away, please.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, and then good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody around the world. So I'm here with Mr. Dube, who we've worked with, and I think if I'm going to share this story, I need to maybe start with giving the background of actually, how, we came about to say, let's actually involve Mr. Dube in this conversation. So if you maybe go to the next slide for us. So I'll just give the context. So this began with the Lean Institute Africa engaging with the Gauteng Department of Health. That's the provincial office, administration office for public health service, So in 2014, end of 2014, beginning of 2015, we called in because the department was dealing with a lot of issues. One of the top problems that we identified was complaints due to long waiting times. If you see in some of those images, in a lot of the facilities, there would be long queues. Some patients would wait for the full day and even being turned away without service. And then as a result, then they engaged the Lean Institute Africa and said, can you maybe just run a pilot to show us that, you know, we can use Lean to help improve? And as a result, there were 4 facilities that were grouped, and we then ran, we would run a 5-day rapid improvement event, followed by deploying of the daily management system to support and continue that improvement. Now, what you see that was at the end of that rapid improvement event, there was some improvement in terms of reducing that waiting time. And we continued until around June 2016. And even then, they were able to sustain those improvements because at that time we were still visiting. But now, what happened was after we stopped supporting the project, somehow this project was derailed at those sites. They lost all of those gains, and some of them went even back to where they used to be. And this was all with the exception of that Leratong Hospital, which is where Mr. Dube was the CEO. In this case, this facility was even able to start this work in other departments on their own and actually achieve this improvement. So if you go to the next slide. So we then reflected amongst ourselves as the LEA project team to say, but what is setting up this environment different to the others? And really, when we looked at it, it was really the involvement of the CEO. What we saw was that Mr. Dube was there doing the gambas. He was holding his management team accountable, requiring them to give regular feedback as part of his management meetings. And he gave people space to try out, and he did quite a lot to, to get the team to actually, champion and continue with this, with the improvement. Next slide. So that's really how we got to say, but yeah, there was really something about how, Mr. Dube was leading. But now maybe as a quick, intro, Mr. Dube, of yourself. What's interesting is Mr. Dube started as a clerk. So he joined as a clerk, and then he became a CEO, which was a position he held for 12 years. So if maybe by way of introducing yourself, just what are the key lessons that you got from, your journey in the department from the time you joined as a clerk?
Okay, thank you, Tsepo. I think my journey started as a clerk in 1973. And then the key learnings there was that obviously there's a lot of curiosity as a leader. And then you need to try and think about yourself and your people that you are serving, as well as yourself in terms of career. So when I started there, I was a clerk with grade 12, and I was just busy working at the counters, getting information from patients. Then I decided to register with the Technical SA, doing organization and work study in the public service. And that really opened my mind, as well as because the attributes of a work study officer, one of them is to be humble, be able to ask humbly inquiry questions, to be curious and inquisitive, And then I decided also to do public management and administration at higher level as well. And then mainly I was doing admin, but within a period of about 6 years, I think the leadership saw leadership in me, and then I started progressing from administration up to the level of the CEO. And then at that time, I was curious to say things were doing well, but sometimes people, the results were not sustained. Then I was busy, curious, trying to get what could we do to try and sustain what we achieved by then. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So if you go to the next slide, because I think you kind of touched on maybe my next question, but I want to maybe start it with, when I listen to the other leaders from the other facilities who the engagement at their facilities fell flat, where they were not supporting the initiative. What was mentioned was, there was a lot of firefighting in those environments. They were distracted by many things, and as a result, did not give attention to the lean program. However, when we look at your scenario, it was not so different, because in there we are seeing that in terms of your facility, 855 beds, servicing, a community or a population area in your catchment, 1.5 million of 84% of them uninsured, where you were getting approximately 25,000 visits a month, and you are supporting 78 service points. And so this is, showing the demand. There was quite a lot of demand on your facility. And then you, as a CEO, you are, you have a number of stakeholders who demanded time and attention from you. You are responding, you are reporting to the chief director of the district, and indirectly you still have to, report to the premier, to the office of the MEC. That's the political head looking after health. And then there's also the head of the department at the head office, and you've got the board you need to pay accounting to. There's the union, organized labor, the community interest groups, your staff. So you were also more or less in this very, demanding, scenario. So, but the question is, which we go to the next slide, is, but then what attracted you? Because just like those other leaders, you were in a very demanding environment, and yet you stayed, you stayed the journey.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest attraction was that as a leader, you need to view health in a holistic way, not as an individual of a regional hospital. So what I did, the first thing I called all the clinics and the district hospitals managers that refer to us. And then we had meetings to try and understand, to say, is this big elephant in the room, how best can we approach in trying to manage it? And then the team suggested that, okay, let's start having the issues of what we call it referral cluster meetings, where we have clinical managers and nursing will meet and discuss around the challenges around patient care. And then the other thing that also attracted us to be doing lean was that, there was a systems that were defined in lean, like, for example, process mapping, A3 thinking, visual management. And those systems, the colleagues didn't understand it so well. And then the other thing that also attracted me was that, if you link the behaviors, like the fundamental Shingo behaviors, that willingness, curiosity, humility, self-discipline, and leader standard work, now that also coupled to that, it also led me to understand now as a leader that you need to try and be more on the ground than in your office. Because the more time you spend on the ground interviewing the staff, asking them those humbly questions that Benny referred to, that what can I do to assist you doing your job better? And then that resulted in me having less problem coming to my office. But at first, when we started with the leadership, they were so reluctant to leave their offices to go to the Gemba walks and see what is happening at the front line where patient value is created. Now, I took them the first, what I call the Kremba walk. I took them to one of the neonatal units and then went with all of them. And then when I was in that neonatal units, You know, the nurses were just surprised to say, what is happening? Are the management coming to chastise us or what? Then I started with them and said, no, I'm here with my executive to observe the great work that you people are doing. And then, you know, their faces, some of them were surprised to say, why is the saying coming to acknowledge? Then I said, no, as leadership now, we have now adopted the lean management system, where we need to spend more time interviewing you, seeing what you are experiencing on a daily basis. And as management, we are here to support you in terms of the resources, in terms of the challenges that you have. And then people started to relax now and started talking, because one of the questions that I asked them to say, what is the biggest problem that you as a leader of this unit you are trying to resolve? And then the people start opening to say, no, yeah, I've got the challenges with a shortage of staff. Yeah, I can't even have an equipment to use to cool off the babies. And then I said, fine, okay, the support that you require from me as a CEO, what do you need? They will say, no, I need this instrument, I need this, I need this. And then as management, I will say, fine, team members, you heard the staff, what they are saying. Let's try our best to ensure that we try and meet them halfway with all, even if we don't have, but let's try. And then where we didn't have budget, I'll go and look for sponsors. And fortunately, the sponsors also responded. And then within a period of a month, I think the staff now realize that no, the management now is here to support, not really chastising us. And all the other departments also that we visited now, it's like they were saying, when is management coming to see us? You know, because they could see that management is no longer chastising.
Yes.
And as a result of that, I had few problems now coming to my office. And then one of the things that also we adopted, the no meeting zone. So where we were in Wisconsin, with Dr. Tusant, we went there with Professor Norman from LIA, and then we saw that now they had some days where they say there are times of the day that there will be no meeting. The ESCO of the institution must use that time to go and visit the frontliners, talk to them and see what they are doing, what they are experiencing on a daily basis. And that was really a good progress. And the patients were happy, staff was happy, complaints were getting lesser.
Yeah. So effectively, you saw the results.
Yes.
So the results also attracted you.
Yeah.
The fact that the engagement from your staff, now they were looking forward to you coming to see them, so that you would say maybe those are the things that attracted you.
Yes.
Oh no, thanks. So maybe let's go then to the next slide, which is really looking at the next question. That clearly, I mean, it probably was not all smooth sailing. This, being a leader, you are trying out, you attend these conferences or you attend these trainings, they introduce these concepts. So, I mean, do you have maybe just if you share a case where you were proposing something that, you learned, and now your management team or your staff said, they were reluctant. They didn't believe you. But then, after a while, after trying it out, they realized that actually this is working.
Yes.
Do you have, did you encounter those? Do you have one example maybe that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think we had a lot of resistance, especially from the clinicians, the doctors. So they saw this as a time waster, Now, one of the examples that I will share is one of the clinics in the surgical unit. And then the doctors there, I think they were challenged by the time that the patients were too many. And then they were starting their clinic at 11 o'clock, while the patients were coming at 8 o'clock. Now we went there, I said to them, man, let's do an observation on this unit, which we call it a silent Gemba walk. And then I spoke to them, then they went there, they saw the patients, they saw the patients were complaining, the doctors were not there. And then I said to them, okay, fine, can you do a process mapping on this unit and see how best we can improve it? Some of them will say, no, this is just administrative burden because of this process mapping. But eventually they agreed to do it. And then that clinic was, the doctors were finishing their shift at 6 o'clock instead of 4 o'clock. And then the patients were complaining. Now, after the process mapping, we realized that the doctors were starting their time at 11. Most of the time, all of them goes to the ward. And then meantime, there's nobody who's starting the clinic. And then we spoke to them and we convinced them that no, your problem is this starting late, going all in the wards. And then some of them started agreeing reluctantly to say, okay, fine, we'll share amongst, we'll share ourselves. Two will go to the clinic, and then the rest will go to the wards, and then we'll interchange. And then once we finish the ward, we'll join you. And then when they started 8 o'clock, and then the other came at 11, I think their first clinic, first day, they finished at around 2 o'clock.
Wow, they used to finish after 6.
After 6 years.
Now from 6, now they're finishing at 2.
2 o'clock. Now they saw that no, man, this system works because now we are now going off earlier.
Yes.
And then we don't, and then they started, buying into the system. And then I can mention many examples.
Yeah.
But this was the key one, that
Yes.
because patients were happy, and then they were
The
all
clinicians were so happy.
that they also benefited. Instead of leaving at 6 o'clock, 2 hours
Yeah.
more, they were getting 2 hours, 1 hour less,
Wow.
or 2 hours less. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was our aha in terms
Uh-huh.
of that clinic of surgical OPD in Radong. Yeah.
Now, thanks for sharing that. No, that's a great example. So if you go to my last question is based on my observation when I was at Leratong Hospital. I saw that in the waiting areas, this is a requirement in a lot of the hospitals, because I saw that the other hospitals, they will just have the pictures of the management team. But what I saw at Leratong Hospital when Mr. Dube was CEO is they would have the pictures of the management team with their titles and their contact numbers, mobile numbers. I mean, can you just maybe share how did it, come about that you did that, and what was the experience of, if you just share that with us?
Yeah, no. You see, that came about when there was a lot of complaints after hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I arrive in the morning, the matrons will share me that there were a lot of complaints. Patients were complaining that the doctors were not there, nurses were rude. And then I decided, no, man, instead of the patients now struggling to lodge their complaints after hours, and let's display our numbers, cell phone numbers, our email address in the busiest areas of the hospital, and all other areas as well. And then we discovered that now the first week, I mean, I received a lot of complaints. I think it was more than 20 at night, some of them around 12 o'clock. But I was patiently attending to all those problems and referring them to the right relevant managers. And then within 2 weeks, I received 2 complaints at night. And then probably after a month, I hardly received the complaints in 2 weeks, because now managers were aware that patients have direct access to me. They have direct access to the medical managers. And then when I receive complaints, I'll phone the medical manager to say, there's a problem in your area, please attend to your doctors, and then give me the feedback. And that also helped to reduce the number of complaints after hours. Patients were happy. And then the executives who complain that now, by putting our numbers there, we'll be exposing ourselves, won't rest. But they were appreciating, because now they were resting. Now when we came in the morning, we had not been bombarded with lots of complaints that happened after hours. So that really helped, that was a good system, which I also encourage my colleagues to put, because now it also reduced the number of complaints that goes to the province, that goes to the district.
Yeah.
I mean, the CEO will be connected, understanding what is happening in the institution, and also trying to come with a remedial action.
Yeah. No, thank you, Mr. Dube. I think that's a brilliant example, which really, I think, demonstrates all of these traits that we're speaking about, because it's really courageous, because I don't think your management team were happy. They happy.
No, they were not happy.
They were like they were resistant.
Yeah.
So
But eventually they saw the benefit of those pictures and the numbers.
Yeah. So I think that's it for us, because I think with that short conversation, at least I think we've managed to demonstrate those key attributes of curiosity, looking to develop yourself, having courage to try and do this, what looks like very challenging, and you're doing it because you care about your people and your your clients or your customers. So I'll hand back to Ben, and then we'll obviously stay here until there are questions at the end of our chat. Thank you, Ben.
No, thank you guys. That's a fantastic case study, and it is lovely having your wisdom, Mr. Dubé, to have the initial glimpse of what Lean can do and some of the principles and tools, but then to put it into action and realize the resistance and realize the initial conflict perhaps that you went through. You obviously can appreciate that journey, and I appreciated the good thinking. So the ideas that were coming to your mind as the leader, just to be able to take those and be respectful, but then to create or improve the system that you had your team in and have that be something that they could use to get even better. So great practical example. I loved hearing it. So that was a privilege to be part of. Let's focus then on some of the traits that were mentioned, and then we'll use these just to tie off on our final element here with collaboration. But as we heard, the courage to have a long-term outlook, to be the one that kind of throws the stone down the road and says, here's where we're heading. I've seen it. I know what's possible. I know what we're capable of doing as a team. Let's give ourselves a vision and a target that we can work towards collectively. And then alignment and priority. So as we begin on that journey, how do we continue to create the systems, to create the way that we can be on the same page and create that alignment to results and to metrics and goals. And then I think curiosity, what a good term if you can put that into practice. And especially as a leader, I think this is where you sometimes, or at least I can speak from my young experience, but when you've seen things happen before and you've been in a lean transformation, you've been in other organizations, you kind of forget where you were and you just take it for granted that you have that knowledge. And so I think having that curiosity to go back to the learner's mindset and realize that not everybody has done this before. Not everybody's been through some of the challenges you heard from Mr. Dubé. Not everybody's had the challenges of engaging the team or bringing the team along the journey of making these problems visible. So it's that curiosity to, again, continuously learn and be part of that journey and not just the one that kind of steps back and lets them mess around a bit. Self-development as well. I'm sure over the course of your career, Mr. Dubé, you've taken it upon yourself to learn, to read, to teach, to write, etc., to be able to practice those traits as a leader, to be sharing your message with others. And I appreciate you being here to do that with us. So great to hear the traits. Collaboration, let's focus on these as our final elements. And I'm taking this more high level, perhaps, just with this thinking of what Lean is capable of. We've heard it from the perspective of a servant leader. So somebody that works for others, somebody that is getting in early, staying late, thinking on behalf of the team. They're bringing me these problems to start. And me as the leader, it's not that I'm taking those and solving them, because we know from other lessons that would be disrespectful if we're not teaching how to fish. If we're just giving the fish, that's not a sustainable system. So the servant leadership mentality is, hey, I want to create the system for my team to bring me the problems, but over time, I need to be a couple steps ahead to be able to think through how do I coach them to get down that path. I'm not just giving them the answer. I'm not just kind of working through it on my own and giving it back to them. It's me as a servant leader. How do I help coach and guide and share that lesson that they're able to learn and in turn teach others? So servant leadership, obviously we've heard of in different contexts, and then systems perspective. So you mentioned it there as well during the interview, but the idea of things working together in an interrelated standpoint. And we heard some great lessons last night on supply chains and some of the JIT and just-in-time elements that aren't working as well as we know they could at this point in time. But it's just the idea that everything is so interconnected, the world that we live in, the communities that we are part of, the businesses that we work within. So we need to be thinking as leaders, how do my decisions impact the others? How do we be thinking more to collaborate versus compete? And we know that from the prisoner's dilemma. So if we're all optimizing for our own best interest, that doesn't lead to a good outcome. So the systems perspective is an important thing as a leader to practice and to take upon yourself to learn more and go through that research. So the two final elements here in the last 5 or so minutes, long-term mutual prosperity, and then we'll touch on partnership. So this long-term mutual prosperity idea is sometimes esoteric and nebulous, but I love it. And it for me really helped capture what is the purpose of a lean enterprise or a business. And people sometimes give it a knock and, oh, it's all about profitability, all about returns. It says, hey, that's part of the company's goals. In order to be sustainable and to be able to make these contributions, we need to have a profit. And we're going to have that as a clear goal, that we're bringing the team along that journey in order to help us to get there. And we're setting that as a target as a result. And then we want to be respectful. So when we're bringing an employee in, that they have their sets of goals as well. Every individual we know is wired differently, but we want to be cognizant and mindful of the individuals that we're bringing onto our teams, what motivates them intrinsically, and what can we do not only to create a safe workplace, to create meaningful work, to engage them in problem solving, but also how do we show them a clear path for growth? How do we, again, flesh out some of those personal goals to be able to understand what they're wanting to learn is in line with what we need to be learning as an organization to be more effective. So this idea of long-term mutual prosperity can otherwise be known as win-win, and a very simple concept, and many teachers over time have taught that well. But if we can truly be thinking win-win, and the decisions that we're making and the systems that we're creating, we know by principles that over time that does bode well. And that blue arrow, we see that mutual trust. This is the most difficult aspect. So it's very easy to do the lip service and very easy to kind of start these things. But over time, if there's not follow-up, if there's not transparency, if there's not that back and forth between the leader and the team member, that they trust that we're on the same page, then it quickly degrades. So this mutual trust is something that must be tended very, very often with discipline on a regular basis, to have those conversations, ask those humble inquiry, those coaching questions, to make sure that we don't let problems dam up. We're always continuing to solve and make progress. And then a key term, and this is emblazoned, I remember being on the walls in Toyota City, my first trip to Japan, today for tomorrow, and having this mentality that the decisions, the actions that we're taking today, the improvements of today are going to be manifest, whether tomorrow is the next day or next week or 15 years, 100 years from now. It's just that thinking of long-term, not only for mutual prosperity, but also with how you have a role as part of your ecosystem. So in this vein, we see it. It's branching up from the company. The company has its members and the families that make up that ecosystem, and then in turn, the community and society. And we've seen Toyota illustrate this very well, and we use them as an ideal. But any business or any operation in any part of the world has such a widespread ripple effect that can grow over time just through the team members that are there, the families that are kind of there with them. And a quick story on that, I remember being in Japan on that, I think that same trip, and we went through a Toyota supplier, did a great factory tour. We were back in the conference room, and the president of the company was saying, my favorite moment of the day is that 8 a.m. bell. And Mr. Dubé, you made me think of that at 8 a.m., but he said 8 a.m. every morning is when the machines start up. It's when all my team members are working at their operations, and I can look out the window or I can be there on the floor and I can hear them humming, and that's just my favorite part. And I said, well, that is just because that's when you start making money. Is that right? That's when everything's going. He said, no, that's one small part. But the biggest part is that if my team members are at their workstations at 8 a.m. every day, that means that now I'm in the position of responsibility to put them in the right position to learn, to grow, to develop. It means that their families are in good health, their children are at school, they're taken care of, they made it here safely today to work. And now me as the leader, how do I best utilize their time and make them as successful and effective as they can be? And whoa, that's a big challenge. But when you begin to look at it and appreciate that you're creating these systems, you're the steward of the system, then you get more and more motivated to think more broadly than just that one world that you might be working in. And people find that truly engaging and inspiring to be part of. And so we talk about this idea of purpose, that, hey, if we're bringing people in and promising them good pay and good benefits or whatever, that will keep them for so long. But we've seen, as we mentioned before, people very quickly will become disengaged, or they'll lack the fulfillment or whatever. And we have to be continually going through this, setting a vision that truly inspires our team, that they appreciate their role and the contributions that they're making to the vision and mission of the company, that does think just beyond the walls of the one environment. I throw these in here just as a quick little demographic point and context around where we're heading in the world. And I do this because we are speaking to you from South Africa, from Cape Town and Johannesburg. But if we look at population over the next, call it 80 to 100 years, we realize that we're in the midst of a demographic shift. So we see this top left-hand side, this graph, that purple line you see is Africa's population growth. The green line on the top is Asia's population growth. And we see the other countries there below. And then South Africa as a country, bottom left-hand side, you can see a very similar trajectory that they're on. And then you look at the world, and these are the population pyramid, so to speak, so showing the age kind of up the y-axis there. This is painting a very clear picture that there's youth. There's a tremendous amount of youth in these developing countries, developing economies. And there's not as much of that youth in countries we know, such as Japan and Western Europe, and even the US is in that category a bit. So I put these on the page because the topic of our discussion today is building these lean leadership traits for the next generation. And I think, Mr. Gray, you've illustrated it perfectly, that our leaders, and I've been very blessed in my career to have learned from some great mentors and people that are older, obviously have the wisdom, have the gray hair, but I think in turn you realize the responsibility of how do you continue to pass those traits, continue to pass those elements that we've heard on to the next generation. So that over time, with this population growth, especially in these developing countries, we know we need leaders that are thinking win-win, that are thinking at a systems level, that are thinking collaboration. If we can have more of that, I believe the world would be a better place. So I put these here because that's the heart I have to be in South Africa. And I know that's the heart of our Lean Institute team, to be able to spread these principles and then create that system of collaboration. And just on that final note, I've been doing some study recently with W. Edwards Deming, and I'm sure everybody's heard of him through quality management, et cetera. Just a fantastic guru of the field. And so his book, and talking about the new economy, new economics, looking at the role of different stakeholders across these ecosystems. So these partnerships, I believe with the lean mindset, we can put these into practice, and easier said than done, obviously, but I think to help illustrate it, helps clarify the roles of each of these stakeholders from a business, education, government, and civil society standpoint. If we can articulate what's the standard, or what are we working towards, what's the ideal vision that each of these different stakeholders are working towards, that oftentimes are optimized for the silo. We heard that before, compete or collaborate. Hey, I'm driven to compete because that's what I know optimizes the world I operate in. But if we can over time be thinking, again, the role of the business within their community, within their society, and in turn, all these other stakeholders you see, how do we then kind of continue to participate in this collaboration? And I have this question mark on the top here because it's difficult to define what does a win-win look like for all these different stakeholders. And I don't believe the world is on the same page with what those are. So I'll give the best current example of that. And we have the UN Sustainable Development Goals just as a clear standard. And I like the language that they use, saying no poverty, zero hunger. So they're giving some very clear targets that we want to reach. And I'm sure we can all agree upon that there's a lot of good in those elements. There's some that we would, I'm sure, debate a bit, but to the point, if we can align as a global ecosystem as what are we working towards, and then using some of those lean principles, those problem solving, that discussion, that collaboration to take us forward towards it. I mean, we can't disagree with the principles. So I think I put that out there just as a challenge with whatever context, whatever role you find yourself in. How can we be thinking broader? How can we be thinking not only the direct lens in front of us, but the systems we operate in, but how do we look at some of these other partnerships and stakeholders as well? All right. On that note, I'll open the floor up for questions. We got 5 or 10 minutes here. Anton will help us facilitate in the chat, but we would love to hear from you and make this an interactive session if there's anything we can clarify or expand upon.
Thanks, Ben, Tsepo, and especially Mr. Dube. I have to say that was once again an inspiring story to hear. So we don't actually having any questions at this moment. If you do have any, please put them in the chat and we'd be happy to respond to them. So it looks like we're going to have time for a small bonus. Ben, if you can let me share, then I would like to share a video of Mr. Dube and the next generation.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's see if I can do that. Conquer the technology. Unfortunately, it seems my computer has frozen.
These things tend to happen. That's all right.
It's just amazing. So
perhaps you could, if you've got it on YouTube or whatever, you could post that into the chat maybe.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, my computer is not cooperating at all. I'm just glad you can still hear me talk. So I'm afraid I'm just going to have to tell you about the little bonus video, which is a video. Once we were on a study visit at Leratong Hospital, and Mr. Dube was explaining to us how he was doing his management, and he talked about doing Gemba walks, but he didn't just do Gemba walks. He also had his assistant, a junior lady in his office, accompany him as his buddy to observe his behavior and give him feedback after the Gemba walk on how he was doing. And in the kind of organization that he was leading, that was definitely breaking the mold, because it in the public sector in South Africa certainly is still very top down, and asking somebody more junior than yourself to give you feedback definitely was very, very noticeable. And in the video, this lady shares how empowered she felt, and how that inspired her to do greater things herself, given such great. All right. So with that, I think I haven't seen any questions in the chat.
We do have one question, Anton, here from Adam. And he asked the question kind of on the vein you were speaking there. How do we overcome command and control management thinking and move to lean leadership? And especially if leaders won't go to the Gemba. So I think that's a familiar question. Challenge.
I think that one we must pass to you.
No, absolutely. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Seppo and Mr. Dube dropped off there. They might join back with us. But my answer to that question, Adam, would be start within your span of control. And you might have heard it in a couple of the talks yesterday, but kind of if you can practice the lean leadership behaviors on your own accord to start, and then become the champion, so to speak, in that vein of going to the Gemba, of going and asking those leadership questions, of asking where the pain points are. How can I help you to solve these problems that you're helping me to identify? And you begin to gain the rapport. And I've felt that, and that's a respect that you obviously hold on to when you're in a new environment. If you can ask those questions of the team, they look at you as a leader because you're asking the right questions, the principle-based questions. And so I think that sets the example. And I've seen it more often than not. If you can have respect for your peers or people that would, in your view, be one of those lean leaders that isn't living up to the standard, that if you can even demonstrate it so consistently and do that on a daily basis, regular basis, ask those questions, I believe over time that they'll ask you, well, what is your secret? How did you get so good at this? People look up to you differently. They speak to you differently. And I would say you continue to practice those traits and those principles and being respectful. So I think first do with what's in your control. So obviously you can only control yourself to get going in that journey. And then over time, as your influence grows as a leader, obviously you make that the standard. And you say our standard, to what we heard earlier, we're going to do no meetings on a Thursday afternoon so that everybody goes to the Gemba. And we might have to print out a little template with some questions that they need to ask. So we've got to go baby steps to start, but you build those habits little by little, build those habits. And over time, the leadership behavior improves, and the team, the way they're looking at that behavior.
Okay, Ben, thanks very much. If you wouldn't mind checking whether there are any other questions.
Absolutely.
And if not, I think we'll close the session and give our audience a few minutes
I
back
see there's a question about command and control.
Thanks again once again to everybody that came to see the session, and we hope to see you soon in one of the next sessions. Bye then.
Anton, can you hear us?
I think Anton wants to head off to lunch.
I thought there's a question on the command and control.
Yeah, and I think we've got a couple minutes left. So if people want to hang on, that's perfectly fine. And Anton, sorry to jump in on the close, but we didn't let you give a opportunity there, Mr. Dube, to answer the question. So we were on that vein with the story of how you behaved at the Gemba and how you behaved when the team members were asking you the questions, but Is there a response that you would give, Mr. Dubé, if you can read that question there? How would you overcome some of that command and control thinking?
Okay, yeah. I think in terms of command and control, I think what I did as a leader was learning this Shingo fundamental behaviors. I think those started with willingness, humility. Under humility, you go and see, and then curiosity, you listen to the people, you respect the individuals, and then obviously when you in that Gemba walk, you know, this Shingo principle will mold you into the listening more, respecting individuals, and then building future leaders, because your goal is to develop future leaders. So once they see that the leader is supportive, is respectful, and obviously it will change my behavior, because how the people are viewing me and they are respecting me, and that is really led me to the change behavior. And I managed to get a lot of respect from professors, clinicians, because of the humility and the respect that I afforded to people, and the support that I give to people, and that really showed that the leader cares for us, you know. And then and whenever they are in problems, I'm with them. I work with them. Yeah.
I think, Mr. Dube, what you're saying, because there's something that you mentioned then the other time we spoke, it's connected still to what you're saying, is that you shared that when you were still operating under command and control, you saw that when there were interventions, when there was a problem, people will do something only when you're there, and then when you go away, they revert back to the old ways.
Yeah. Because definitely they were not trained as problem solvers. In fact, they were just trying to please you when you are there. When you go back, they go back hobbies. But once you start developing them with this lean management system, process mapping, visual board, and then they also enjoy to come and report to me in the EXCO meeting on the Mondays to say, this is what we did in the pharmacy, this is what we did in FSOD, these are the hurdles that we manage in those clinics. So that really was an opening for me, and it really helped me to grow as a leader. But the main thing is to respect every individual, whether you are a cleaner, whether you are a professor, whether you are whoever. You need to greet and really see people that, and show people that you care, you know. Yeah, irrespective of their levels.
Yeah.
No, I love it. Mr. Dubé, to hear your insight and your firsthand experience as a servant leader, it does give you the inspiration, because obviously I know Seppo and I we're a bit younger, and we've learned the principles, we've learned how to start doing these things, but to hear your perspective on putting it into practice, it paves the way well. So it gives a good heart and a motivation for continuing to move forward. So I think we are now officially out of time, and thank you all for joining us, and thank you for joining in for the whole conference. We'll continue to enjoy it for the next couple of hours, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully one day soon in South Africa. So long for now.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.